Why the philosophy of biology? Why are you a philosopher? Because you alluded to being a molecular biologist or getting a master's degree there. What was the transition, the motivation?
I think a good way of describing what it's like to be a philosopher of biology is to think of the distinction between a chef and a food critic. Chefs are very, very busy trying in the kitchen, trying to get everything to work, and sweating and getting everything not to overboil, and managing a team and under a lot of pressure. And they do the best they can, and they're very good at what they do, but unfortunately don't usually have the opportunity to sample the delights that they come up with. And so the food critic comes, all nice, freshly showered and nicely dressed, comes to the restaurant directly and is served this wonderful dish and can just reflect on it and sample it, enjoy it, think about it compared to other things that he's had in the past. And so that's why it was for me a no-brainer to make this transition from science to philosophy of science.
I've never felt so excited about philosophy.
Now, did you have some bad cooking experiences? What happened to the kitchen early for you? Did you cut your finger too many times, or what led to your personal transition?
I just wasn't very good at it. So I knew I wanted to get into science, and I, studied molecular biology and had a sort of a broad education in the sciences and biology. But in the lab, I was always, really slow, and I just didn't enjoy it. I found it very monotonous, and those who were good at it, were able to, yeah, were quick and were able to move from one thing to another quite fast. And that wasn't my case. What I enjoyed the most was actually, just reflecting on the big questions. And I noticed that scientists, on the whole, didn't do that in their 9 to 5s. It was only after, right, when you're having your beer in the pub that these questions come up, and that's when I was getting most excited. I was thinking, well, I don't want to have to wait, if I pursue this career to sort of the evenings to be able to really get engaged. And so I tried to work out whether there was an opportunity for me to be doing this 9 to 5 rather than on these special occasions, And then I also noticed that it is quite common for scientists at some point in their careers, usually towards the end of their careers, especially if they've made it big, to start getting invited to discuss the conceptual foundations of the science, and start getting invited to not to just present the latest results from the lab, but actually to reflect. And a friend of mine calls this the philopause state. Like it's like a menopause for scientists, where they go through this philopause, where they have a sort of existential crisis, where they start reflecting or dabbling into philosophy, right?
What have I been doing for 30 years?
But usually most scientists do this. I mean, of course there are exceptions, but mostly it happens, towards the end. Or if you get a Nobel Prize, for example, right? You get a Nobel Prize, you're not going to be invited necessarily to talk about results in your lab. You're usually going to be asked to discuss broader and broader questions. So I thought, wow, this is fascinating. This is exactly what I want to do. But I guess I can't wait 30 years. I want to do it now. So yeah, after I finished my, I wanted to make sure that was the case. So the reason why I started thinking this way is because I did a year in the US. I studied in the UK, but I spent a year at the University of Iowa in this big muscular dystrophy lab, and I just, I didn't enjoy it very much, the lab work. So I returned and I thought, okay, which is the area of biology that I'm most excited about? And at the time, I was really into this, these extremophiles, right? And there was Center for Extremophile Research at the University of Bath, where I studied. So I said, okay, I'm going to go and do my master's project there with actually the best professors that I've had in my time as well. And if it turns out that I don't even enjoy it, then I will know that it's not about the topic; it's about the method. And I didn't enjoy it. So I thought, okay, well, I need to find something else to do. And at the time, Ernst Mayr published his last book in 2000. This was 2004. So he published his last book, age 100. He died a few months later, called "What Makes Biology Unique," which is a collection of essays, short essays on actually the philosophy of biology. Essay on how biology relates to physics, another one on teleology and purpose, another one on the role of mathematics in science and explanation. I thought, wow, this is amazing. This is so cool. This is what I want to do. So it was for me a no-brainer. I decided that I discovered there was this thing called history and philosophy of science, right? Which I had no idea it existed. And I just did a master's degree in HPS, loved it. And then I went to do a PhD, loved it even more. And And yeah, that's the story. And it's a very unusual area, right? History and philosophy of science, because you can't really do it unless you're familiar with the science, right? So I discovered that everyone I was with, we're all limping. We only had one good leg, So one had a very good background in physics, right? Another one had a good background in maybe philosophy, another one in history, and so everyone is sort of relying on what they already know and trying to learn as quickly as possible about everything that they don't know, right? So it's a field that is inherently interdisciplinary, but I came to see that it was necessarily interdisciplinary, right? So for the sorts of questions that I want to address, it is necessary to combine actual empirical knowledge of the science that you're looking at with the capacity to analyze things philosophically in a philosophically rigorous way, and also an awareness of the history, which is again super important, right? Understanding where the debates come from, right? Everything is contextual. Most things could have been different, right? There's very little that is necessary in scientific discovery, right? So looking back in the past is often helpful because you find all kinds of ideas, right, that were proposed maybe at the wrong time, and that can help us, especially if the questions that we're interested in are broad enough. Obviously, the more specific the question, the harder it is to find things that are useful in Aristotle. But if the question is super broad, like what an organism is with the agency or whatever, then these are so fundamental, these questions, that you can avail yourself of 2,000 years or 2,500 years of thought. So yeah, for me, this is why it all nicely comes together.
So you're at George Mason now. So how did you end up there from these earlier stages?
Yeah, I'm at George Mason. It's a large public university close to DC, and I was for a very long time, well, in Europe. I studied in the UK and spent time in Tel Aviv and in Vienna, and spent some time also in Sydney and other places. And this was a job that obviously it was a tenure track position. I had been doing postdocs for a long time, and mostly by choice. I actually had my own projects that enabled me to work on what I wanted to do, right, which was nice. But I realized, if I want to stay in the game, I had to get a tenure track position, and this one came up. I really like the location. I'm very much in close contact with students, but I still have the autonomy to teach mostly what I want. So it's worked well. Mm-hmm.
And are you in a biology department, or is it like a philosophy department, or what?
No, it's a philosophy department, but it's an unusual one. So the job ad was unusual. It was like AOS, area specialization on philosophy of biology specifically, right? We want someone who's engaged, an empirically engaged philosopher. And so it was, a perfect fit, really. And I am beginning to forge links with people in the biology department. We have a reading group that we're starting, where we're just basically discussing, biology papers from a philosophical perspective. And I do eventually want to design courses that I can teach in the biology department to biology students, which I found is super exciting for them, because I was one of those students, who was in the biology department, who was wondering, could I maybe ask these sorts of questions, and I didn't have any courses that I could take that would enable me to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Interestingly, well, maybe not interestingly for anybody but me, but I'll say it anyway. I started my bachelor's degree at George Mason,
Oh, wow.
and it was a course that I took on sort of how we know. I think that's what it was called. That really got me into science, and actually was my sort of spark of thinking about the philosophical dimensions of biology. I mean, I took the more, not the more traditional necessarily, but the empirical path. But yeah, it was, it's the same physical location as to where you are now. I didn't finish my degree there. I moved to Virginia Commonwealth in Richmond, but yeah.